Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about how we can find the equation of a line if we're just given 2 points. So we're going to start learning about this topic with a word problem. Canada has some very long winters. Enjoying winter sports such as snowboarding, hockey, and skiing is a great way to make the most of the cold weather. A ski resort rents snowboards by the day. So we make sure we understand each sentence before we move on. Okay? They rent snowboards by the day, so you can't rent it for an hour, you rent it by the day. There's a flat insurance cost. Flat means one price or fixed. So maybe you're paying $10 for your insurance each day. Well, $10 for your insurance is a flat cost, but on top of that, that would be total, and then on top of that, you're paying the rental fee every day. Two friends, Josh and Kylie, have used the rental service before. They compare costs. So Josh says, for 3 days, the snowboard rental cost me $85. And Kylie says, I rented a board for a full week and it cost me $165. So we're going to work on answering these questions here. How much is the insurance cost? So that's the flat insurance cost. What is that? You just pay it once. How much did you pay? And what do you pay for your daily rental fee? Are you paying $5 a day? It wouldn't be that cheap. And also, if you had $120, could you afford to snowboard for 5 days? So we're going to investigate all these questions here. So what's you see here is all laid out for you. This is actually from your textbook, page 338. So all of these 6 questions all refer back to this problem, and really this is the important stuff right here. See the information above, it's not above, it's right here, about renting a snowboard. First thing I want you to do on grid paper, draw and label 2 sets of axes with, I don't know why it says 2, I think that's typo, 1 set of axes with the cost on the vertical, so you're going to do cost is here, if you draw your axes here, there's your cost, and then across the horizontal will be time and days. Now we don't need all 4 quadrants, so when you do draw your axes, I'm just going to do a quick sketch here, I really only need quadrant 1. So cost is going to be up here in dollars and days is going to be down here. So you don't need to be writing all this out because it is just coming out of your textbook on page 338. Okay, so you've got your axes here, but a very important part of the axes is what is the scale going to be, and that's what part B is saying here. Add appropriate scales to your axes. So days, how many days are reasonable? Well, when we look at the question, Josh had his for 3 days. Kylie had hers for a full week. That's 7 days. We know later on down here we're going to talk about 5 days. So probably you only need to go up to maybe 8 or some, you don't need to go much more than 7. So when you're going through here, kind of 8 could be your last one. And for your cost axis, well, what are we going to put on? What are we going to put on for that? Look at the cost numbers that are in the question. We've got an 85 here. We've got 165 here. We've got 120 here. So we want to make sure we at least get 165 up there on the cost axis. So what I'm going to do now is you've got all these questions here, 1 through 6 to do. And if we were in class right now, I would just stop talking and I would have you work on all of this, work on these questions alone. And then when you're done, I would give you 15 minutes for this. And then when you're done, we would take up all the answers. So right now, I want you to do that. Take 15 minutes on your own piece of paper. You're going to work through these questions and pause the video here. I'm not just going to sit here for 15 minutes. I'm going to stop, and then you're going to stop the video and then replay it in about 15 minutes. See how far you got, or longer. Take as much time as you need, and then come back and we'll take up the answers together. So did you stop? I hope you stopped. I hope you're not just watching the whole video without doing any work, because you're not going to learn it if you don't try it yourself. So if you haven't yet, please stop it. Try those questions yourself. Back it up. Look at those 6 questions and see if you can do it. Because just watching me do it isn't enough. And I'm going to go through all of them right now. So it's a good opportunity for you to do questions and then hear the full solutions. So here is the axes that I talked about before. And this one goes up to about 8 days. And here we've got 160. We're counting by 20s there, so we kind of got 180 up there in cost. So that was your first part A, just said set up the axes, and part B for number 1 said add on the appropriate scales. So that's what you should have done. And you should have included subtitles for your axes, time and cost, and then the title for the whole thing is renting a snowboard. But it's really important that you do have your titles on your axes here so that I know what you're talking about. Question 2 said plot the points 385 and 7165, and that comes from, remember Josh, it cost him $85 to have the snowboard for 3 days. So for 3 days, we have to go up here and put a dot on for $85. So there's our first coordinate. Our second coordinate comes from Kylie, who rented it for a full week, so that would be a 7, and she had to pay $165. So question 2 tells us to plot those points and explain what they mean. And then we plot them and draw a line through them. So let's take a look at that. So here's the 2 points, and here's what they represent. That first part of A said, what did they represent? The 3-day snowboard rental, $85, 7-day snowboard rental at $165. That's what those 2 numbers represent. Here they are with a line through them. Extend the line so it crosses the vertical axis, because we just had these 2 dots, but we have to make sure to back it up so that it hits the cost axis here. That was 2B. Question 3 says find the slope of this line and explain what it means, and then find the C-intercept, that's the vertical intercept, and explain what it means. So 20 is the slope of the line. Now, how did you get the slope of the line? So to find the slope of the line, when you have a picture, you can always count, right? You can count out squares 1, 2, 3, 4, and count out rise over run. Whoops, up to here. You could do that, count out rise over run, but look at your scale. I'm counting by, this one is counting by 20s. That makes it a little bit harder. It would be much easier, hopefully, what you did. You wrote, if you put the coordinates here, this one is 385. This one up here is 165. So I would label these x1, y1, x2, y2, and then my slope formula, y2 minus y1. I hope you all have it memorized by now. x2 minus x1. And we sub in. And when we sub in, our y2 is 165 minus 85 over x2 is 7 minus 3. So you're having 80 over 4, and that gives us a 20. So what does the slope mean? In this case, it means, because it's a word problem, it means it's cost $20 a day. So that's your variable number, that's your changing number. So we now know how much money it costs per day. That's what the slope is. And then the second part is the y-intercept, or in this case it's a c-intercept. So the c-intercept is a 25. Switch colors here. C-intercept is a 25. That's right there. And the d-intercept represents, it should be a c-intercept. The c-intercept represents the flat insurance cost for the snowboard rental. So that's your $25. That's your fixed number, or what they called flat. That's what your 3B answer is. Now, hopefully you got all these answers correctly, and you're just watching the video right now going, yep, got it, got it, got it. And that's great. You should be feeling pretty good about yourself, because that was a word problem. And from a word problem, you've pulled out a lot of good information. Question 4 says, write the equation of the line in the form C equals MD plus B. So here is the equation that we just took from the numbers from question 3. We use the variables in the question. And number 5 said, use the graph to find the cost of renting a snowboard for 5 days. Use the graph. So use the graph means I want the snowboard for 5 days. So 5 days is about, about here. So I go up, I'm trying to use the highlighter here, go up to the line, and then I want to go across. I want to go across and see where it's going to hit. So I'm going across this way. So our number 5, by using the graph, we find it costs $125. I'm using a thick highlighter. It's pretty hard to tell when we go all the way across there. It costs $125 to rent the board for 5 days. So whenever you're using your graph, your answer might be different than somebody else's, because this question specifically says using your graph. So I've got to kind of, do the best I can. And then 5B was use the equation to find it. So when we use the equation, here, this is the equation we use, we sub in the 5 days. It's got the word right after it, days. That's my clue that I'm subbing it in for D. I put it in here in the equation and I get 125. So 125 is the correct answer algebraically, and you might have got 120 when you were trying to guess with your graph, or maybe you got 130, but it doesn't matter. Question C says, are these answers the same? So they are the same, but you might not have got the same answer. If I would have looked at my yellow highlight down there, I probably wouldn't have guessed 125. I might have guessed something else, so they wouldn't be the same. And that's okay, because when you use your graph, you're doing some estimating. The last question that was there, question 6, said, reflect, is it possible to find an equation for this line without graphing it? So especially this piece down here, right? Finding the intercept, we just kind of guessed at it, and we may not have, you may have looked at your line and not seen a 25 there. Maybe you thought it was a 30. So how can we do this better without just looking at graphs to find the answer? And so you probably hate it when the back of the book, I do, when the back of the book says answers will vary, because I want to know if my answer is right. But basically, yes. No, I'm not going to read through all of this here, but this is telling you how to find the equation of a line without graphing, but with steps. And I'm going to lay all the steps out for you in a later slide. But yes, you certainly can find the equation of a line when you only have 2 coordinates. Remember, that's what we started with, 2 coordinates. And without graphing it, can we get the equation of a line? Yes, we can. So one more thing before we move on. Is this an example of direct or partial variation? Look at the graph here. You remember that? It's partial variation. And neither the variable cost nor the fixed cost are known. So it's partial because it doesn't go through 0, 0. And it's a little different because in the past, we've often known more information than we did in this question. So we didn't know the slope, we didn't know the y-intercept of the equation of the line. What is known are 2 points from the linear relationship. So when you only know 2 coordinates, I'm going to show you how algebraically we can calculate the equation of a line without drawing a graph and just trying to draw our information from the graph. Example 1. A line passes through the point -3,8 and has an x-intercept of 6. Without graphing, determine the equation of the line. So first of all, without graphing is telling me we have to do it algebraically. However, I personally love having a graph just to use to reflect back on. I'm down here in the corner, in the right corner, I'm just going to do a quick sketch of the x and y axis. It says without graphing, so I'm not trying to be too accurate here. And let me just go, that's 2, 4, 6, 8. Let's say that's 8. And I'll do the same in the negatives, 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm just picking 8 because it's the biggest number I see there in the original question. 2, 4, 6, 8. 2, 4, 6, 8. So remember, the question didn't ask for a graph. So if I were writing this on a test, I would be doing this on scrap paper. But even if I were doing it in my homework, I wouldn't worry about getting out graph paper for this. I would just put a sketch on my page to help me. So let's get this information on here. We've got the point -3,8, so I'm just going to put -3 is about there. And it's got an x-intercept of 6. So I go across the x-axis to 6. That's there. Oops. And I'm just going to do a quick sketch, and I'm just going to try to kind of keep my eye on that as I'm doing my question. So it's just a little visual, a little illustration for me, which I don't need to do, but I'm just going to leave it there. Let's go back to the question here. How are we going to solve it? Okay, first of all, anytime a question asks you for the equation of the line, you're going with your big money maker equation here, which is y equals mx plus b. Now, what can we sub in there? M stands for slope. Do we know the slope? No. I'm not going to go over and count on my graph because we're not supposed to be using the graph. So we have to show all of our work. So I don't know the slope. I'm going to figure it out though. And I don't know the y-intercept. And I could guess at that as well here, but I'm not going to. So here are the steps, and I put them in a chart this time. Step 1 is to calculate the slope. And this is the same step 1 we've had before. And I put over here how many coordinates are needed for each step. To calculate the slope, we need 2 coordinates because of the formula, right? Here's the formula for calculating slope. M for monte. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Where am I going to get those from? So I've got an x and a y already. My x-intercept is 6. That coordinate, if your x-intercept is 6, that's down here. Remember this one right down here? If your x-intercept is 6, the coordinate is 6, 0. So when I sub in, which one's first? This one's first. This is my x1, and this is my y1, and this is x2, and this one is y2. So I've told you before many times, it's so worthwhile to just label those, and then you won't mess it up when using the formula. Subbing into the formula, we've got 0 minus 8 over 6, subtract negative 3, and that leaves us with negative 8 over 9. So now I've got a slope. Now I can go back to my formula, back over to my formula, and I can sub in for the slope because step 1 was calculate slope, so in it goes. There's my negative 8 over 9. Step 2 is to find b. So we're going to find b. We only need one coordinate. We're going to use the slope and one of the points, sub in. To find b, we're going to do it right here. So we calculate slope separately, kind of off to the side, and then we sub it in. But to calculate b, I can just keep working right here. I'm going to use one of the points. I could use either one of these 2 points. I'm a little concerned that maybe sometimes I get my intercepts wrong and I do 6, 0 when I should have put 0, 6. And so I'm not going to use that point just in case I messed up. I'm going to use the point they gave me. This is my x, this is my y. Put them in the right spots. Multiplying fractions, I multiply numerator times numerator, so negative 8 times negative 3, that will be my new numerator. That's a positive 24. 9 stays a 9 because my other denominator was a 1. 24 over 9 can be reduced, and hopefully some of you are getting a little better at reducing earlier on, meaning right here, this 3, I could have divided that by a 3, turned it into a 1, divide this by a 3, turn it into a 3, and then I would have only had negative 8 times 1 over 3. So I get the same answer either way. 24 over 9 is 8 over 3. Now we need to isolate for b. The 8 over 3 comes over to the other side with subtraction, and I have to find a common denominator. This is 8 over 1. So my common denominator is a 3. I have 24 over 3 minus 8 over 3. And that's 16 over 3. So now I have b, and that was step 2. Step 1, I calculated the slope. Step 2, I found b. I only needed one coordinate for that. Step 3 is state the equation. I don't use the coordinates at all for that. To state the equation, you have to replace m and b. X and y stay in the equation. Down here you see there's still an x and there's still a y, but the m and the b were replaced with the numbers that we found. So that's why I did my sketch of the graph over here on the bottom right, just to kind of double check for myself. I got a negative slope, and that makes sense. This is a negative slope right here, so that's reasonable that I've got a negative slope. And I've got a y and a vertical intercept, a y-intercept of 16 over 3. That's just over 5 whole, a little bit over 5. And that makes sense too. It may not be perfect, but it does make sense. So that's how my sketch helps me. Even though I didn't need to do it, my sketch is almost like a little check for me. So if you're starting to feel like, haven't I done all this before? You really have. There's really nothing new here. We started with a word problem. We've got 2 coordinates out of that snowboarding question. That's a little bit new. But everybody knows how to find slope. You've known how to find slope for a while. You've known how to get a b value by subbing in and doing all this work and then getting the equation. So really, we're just pulling a whole bunch of things together. to go from 2 points, right? Starting with 2 points, getting your slope, subbing it in. You've really done all these steps before. So today's lesson is only about 20 minutes because there's nothing much that's new to say. It's just practicing getting the equation of a line from 2 points, whether it's a word problem or whether you're given the points clearly. And that's the end.